I have a backdrop. I don't know if I like it.
And I broke away and I realized that I was that tree and it was my death.
But you've never done anything for me. Ever. You've never risked anything. You don't know me. You don't know anything about me.
Do you think this is what Mother saw before she died?
Do not go far from me.
No, I mean, I trust the others, right? But, like, I know you on a more intimate level.
Because you saw my titties.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's literally it.
It's so touching and ridiculous at the same time.
Critical Role is a show, and its players are performers. This was true even before they knew they had an audience. This has tightened up over time for sure, but even in the early days it was still the case. If you joined this show later than, say, Campaign 1, then just know that the first 20 to 30 episodes are a little shaky. The audio's pretty bad, there's no sets to speak of, the cast arrival time's a little shaky. For a while it was a running gag about Sam always being late. They even, presumably because they just come straight from the day job, are often eating dinner at the table. Something they would never do now. But regardless of that, and what made the show so popular is that they were still leaning heavily into the play acting side of the game. They are, after all, actors and performers. They are happy to make decisions in character, decisions perhaps counter to what they would normally do themselves. In addition, they're often having in-character conversations using the voices of their characters. Okay, quick sidebar. If I think there's been a negative effect of Critical Role on the hobby, I think it's a tendency of some people to think that having a dodgy accent is the same as having a character. I really think that's fed into that. I think one of the reasons Dimension 20 is my favourite show is because the cast aren't really doing that. They're pretty much just themselves. They don't often feel the need to affect a strange accent. Brennan sure does, but he feels like he does it sparingly and often for more comedic effect. Anyway, it feels a little bit more balanced, I think, in Dimension 20. In Critical Role, it sometimes feels like they're doing an accent for the sake of doing an accent, like it's just a challenge to do one. And there's not a lot of logic or congruity to it, like regional areas, other than, I guess, the dwarves often being Scottish. And maybe it's a minor quibble, and maybe that was a problem even before Critical Role happened, but I don't know, it's just something I've noticed. Anyway, what I want to talk about today, I don't think it's talked about enough, and that's how much the players on Critical Role are really driving the game forward. A lot gets said about the Mercer effect, about how Matt Mercer is a good DM and how you can be like him. But honestly, if you're playing in a game right now and your DM is bringing as much Mercer to their table as they can, maybe they've got music playing, maybe they're doing the voices, maybe they've got the atmosphere and the descriptions down, but the magic isn't quite there, I'm going to say that the problem is probably you. The truth of the matter is there's a performative element to what the players are doing, and bringing your A game in that regard can elevate the game to the next level. How can I best explain this? People often say that players will always derail your plans, and that's fine, that's what players are supposed to do. They're supposed to have the freedom to take the story in whatever direction they would like. The actual problematic level of derailing the DM's plans is when players don't react the way they're supposed to. Obviously players are never forced to perform in a certain way, but it really does throw a wrench in the gears when they don't behave in a sensible manner. What that means is, if you're supposed to be scared, be scared. If you're supposed to be sad, be sad. If you're supposed to be happy, and so forth. The DM is very clearly setting out a scene. If he sets out a scary scene with a scary monster, you attempting to flirt with it is just going to with the situation in a way that is confusing rather than fun. This is what the players on Critical Role do very well. They are very good at running with the yes and that Matt throws them. Matt will lay out a scene, for example with a villain that they are clearly supposed to be scared of, and they will act cautious of that villain rather than rushing into combat. That isn't to say you can't get a laugh out of a serious scene. Purvon has just shown up in Legend of Vox Machina Season 2.
I just remember that Purvon's story touched me.
Do it.
Touched me in inappropriate ways.
But if you are purposefully derailing the very atmosphere of the scene, it's quite possible you're ruining it for everyone. You're throwing the DM off kilter, but you're also ruining the other player's chance to just feed into the moment. I've done a tiny bit of acting in my time, and a large amount of my social circle are actors at this point. So I know from experience that acting is tiring. It is sort of weirdly tiring. Part of the reason for this is because if you pretend to be something, you will tend to actually feel it. If you pretend to have fun, you will start having fun. If you pretend to be sad, you will start to get sad. An example I can give is when I was being sent to review movies, I was sent to an early release of Sausage Party. I gave it a relatively positive review because the audience in that early showing absolutely loved it. The atmosphere was very high, everyone was having a good laugh. I then went to see it when it came out of the cinema with my other half, and she hated it. And it fell flat on the whole of that audience. Almost no one laughed at all. And it was a bad film. I was confused about how I had enjoyed it the first time. But the truth is, I had enjoyed the atmosphere. Everyone around me was having fun, and I had fun by some form of osmosis. At the second screening, no one was really having fun, and I was able to see the film for the flawed mess that it actually is. What I'm saying is it's not the DM's job to force a feeling upon you. If they are clearly describing a scary scene but you don't find it scary, well, tough. Pretend that it's scary. Act scared. As a result, you will start to internalize that and become a little scared of the scene. The more serious you take what they're putting down, the more serious it will appear. If you just want to joke around and have a laugh, that's fine, but you can do that in moderation. And also, everyone just sort of does that anyway. That's just kind of a natural element of the game, or indeed just of life. Player buy-in means committing to the bit, committing to the scene that's in front of you. You're going to relate to this on purpose, and you're going to perhaps force yourself a little bit into the mindset of where you're meant to be. But above all else, it's about acting in a sensible manner. I keep going back to fear because that's the most obvious one, but if something's clearly supposed to be scary, be scared of it. More than anything else, the more that you with this, the less the DM will give you these moments. They'll lose confidence in being serious or being sad or running emotional moments in a scene. They'll assume that they aren't working. That's why you're not engaging with them, and they'll just sort of stop doing them. You can't put it all on your game master. Some of it has to come from you. You have to play along. Because if you want to try and capture that critical role magic at your games table, it's on everyone. It's hard to describe how much effort the cast of that show are putting in to keeping that game moving forward, to keeping the atmosphere up, to keeping the energy going, to buying into the story of that world and taking it seriously. That's what you have to do, because your GM can only go so far. And the more you buy in, the more your GM will be confident enough to keep going further and further. They will push themselves that little bit more and get to that point that you want. If you're worried that the game isn't hitting the emotional beats that you'd like it to, if you just buy into the ones that it is hitting, then the DM's confidence will allow them to go one step further each time, and eventually you'll get into that deep dive that you may be looking for. I don't think this gets talked about enough. I think too much pressure is put on dungeon masters and game masters to keep the game alive, and the players get kind of lazy. It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with who your character is. We're not talking about playing in character here. We're talking about just playing in the scene. Just behaving in a way that moves the scene forward rather than a way that tries to make you the main character of it. Because a degree of this, I think, is main character syndrome. The player's trying to become the main character of the show. Now granted, the players are the protagonists of the game, they are the central characters, but sometimes a scene requires them to take a back seat to the atmosphere or to an NPC. This is what Critical Role does really well. They just let Matt overshadow them quite happily with a elaborate NPC or a set piece. Now, sometimes this can feel a little railroady, and I have my thoughts on that regards to Critical Role, but a lot of the time that's just what has to happen. The players can't always be the centre of attention, and they can't always be able to dominate a scene if the scene is beyond their control. The player buy-in is about surrendering yourself to the game and agreeing to behave in a way that fits the scene that you're in. This can be harder perhaps in D&D because, as I said before, it is a power fantasy game. The players are supposed to feel like they can dominate this world, and at a certain point they pretty much can. It can feel hard to tackle this as a DM because you can't insta-kill your players. Well, you can, but it feels cheap in D&D. In other systems, player characters are a little more fragile, so if somebody's threatening them, you can feel like, well, they might be scared that they might actually get killed. Whereas in D&D, if you threaten someone, it's like, well, It's going to take at least 2 hours worth of combat for you to kill me, so why don't we have a crack at it? So I kind of think the DM is a little bit powerless to stop this play, so really I'm putting it all on the players. Players have got to buy into the scenario. Anyway, that's me for another week. This has been a little bit different. This was an unscripted video, in fact. I've just been riffing. I wanted to see if I could just take an idea and just riff on it and see what we end up with. If it didn't work, then it's possible that I will just delete all of this in shame. But yeah, if you like this, please do like and subscribe. Drop some thoughts in the comments on the player buy-in. Check out all my links. I've got all my link tree and my social medias in the bio below. I also have a Ko-Fi for this channel, and I don't promote enough, it's relatively new, but I need to figure how that one out, so yeah, check that out as well. Check out all my other videos that are popping up wherever the end screen points appear, and yeah, thank you for watching. The end.